Chapter 8. The return flight to Gaspard felt like a lifetime. Ashe stared out the window, watching the clouds pass by, but not really seeing them. Strangely, he felt as though he'd left a piece of himself behind in FE3H, and that the capital was calling to him, begging him to return. This must be what heartbreak feels like. If this was a story, the hero would heed that call, return to the palace and the person they left. There would be a reunion, tearful, joyous, and hopeful, with promises of a bright future. Whatever challenges came their way, they would face together. The people would cheer, and the hero and their love would live happily ever after. Love. Is that what this was? This feeling? This pull in his chest, regret and worry of having ruined such a special connection to Dimitri? Ashe shook the thoughts from his head. Idiot, he chided himself. The longer he allowed himself to fall into this fantasy, the harder it would be to let go. And he needed to let go. You do not want to test me, boy. Even now, high above the Fargus countryside and miles away from the capital, Cornelia's words lurked in the back of his mind, creeping around the corners to remind him just how unworthy he is. Kristoff and Evelyn met him at the airport. His sister ran and jumped into his arms, almost bringing them both to the ground. "You're finally back!" She smiled, eyes wide in anticipation and talking a mile a minute. "Tell me everything! What's the capital like? Did you bring me a present? Did you meet the prince? What's he like? Is the really cutest person you see on TV? Did you meet any girls? Did you go to the ball with? What about—" "Slow down, Evie," Kristoff admonished with a laugh, ruffling her hair. "Let him try to answer a question before you ask another." "But I have so many questions," she insisted. Ashe laughed. "I'll tell you everything when we get home, okay, Evelyn? I promise." Satiated for now, his sister smiled and hugged him again. "I missed you so much." Ashe tugged her close to him. "I missed you too." "I missed you too, you know," Kristoff joked with an easy shrug. "Admittedly, not as much as she did, but yeah." Ashe set Evelyn back on the ground and hugged his brother. "I missed you too, Chris. Admittedly, not as much as I missed Evelyn, but yeah." Kristoff pulled away and looked into Ashe's eyes. He could always tell when something was bothering Ashe, and apparently some time away hadn't dulled his brother's intuition. Ashe gave a slight shake of his head. "I don't want to talk about it." Kristoff nodded in understanding and took Evelyn's hand. "All right, then. Let's head home so Ashe can shower us with presents." "Hey, wait a minute! I didn't actually say anything about presents." For the next few weeks, Ashe wandered around Castle Gaspard in a bit of a daze. Just when he thought he was starting to move on from his feelings for Dimitri, something would remind him of the prince and his time in the capital. Small things, like his favorite coffee shop advertising a special chamomile tea blend, or the bright blue sky. Prince Dimitri started appearing in the papers more frequently since his birthday, though less for his politics and more for his personal life. With his coronation fast approaching, the pressure was on for the prince to take a partner. Fargan law stated that if the prince was unmarried at his 25th birthday, he would be allowed to assume the throne. However, he had 3 months to marry, or else his rule would be forfeit and pass to the next heir. Since Dimitri was an only child and his step-siblings were not fully related, there was no suitable heir from the bladed family. Rule would then be passed on to the royal advisor. Ashe cringed, thinking about what Lady Cornelia's rule would be like. Luckily, the prince's coronation was next week, and he would be married before the new year. Flipping through the paper, Ashe's eyes fell on an article speculating on the prince's relationship status, currently focusing on a man from Elmira. Reading through it, the journalist speculated the man, Claude von Regen, was a son of Elmiran nobility, distantly related to their king. While a marriage might not prove immediately beneficial to Prince Dimitri and the people of Fargus, the article admitted that it's never too early for the prince to begin forming alliances separate from those his father once had. "What do you mean?" Ashe startled at his sister's voice. He'd been so lost in his thoughts and the words of the article he hadn't heard her enter the library. "Nothing, really. Just the paper." Evelyn scooted a chair closer to her brother and sat. Her eyes glanced over the newsprint on the table. "I'm excited to go to FE3H, aren't you?" Ashe nodded with a soft smile. "It'll be nice to see Sylvain and Felix again, and I can take you to that bakery I told you about." "And will you get to see Prince Dimitri again?" Ashe was taken aback. Well, you'll get to see him too, at his coronation." "Yeah, but that's not what I meant." Before he could ask what she could have possibly meant instead, Evelyn tapped on the newspaper, a picture of Dimitri in one of the palace gardens, sitting opposite another man the journalist identified as Claude von Regen. They were smiling and laughing at something the other had said. Ashe couldn't help but think they looked so happy together.
You know, you still haven't told me about him. The prince, I mean,
she said, batting her eyelashes dramatically. Ashe couldn't help but laugh. What do you want to know? Evelyn hummed, tapping her index finger to her chin, her face contorted in an over-exaggerated contemplation.
What's he like?
Well, Ashe began, his chest tightening as he thought of how to describe Dimitri. He's very regal and poised, I guess.
All princes are regal and poised, Ashe. She rolled her eyes. That's part of the job description. What else? Is he stuffy like Lord Halliwell?
You know that's not a nice thing to say about Lord Halliwell, he reprimanded gently. But no, he isn't. Dimitri is very kind and a just leader. He's fair and loyal to his friends.
Dimitri?
What? Evelyn sat up straight.
Dimitri! You just said Dimitri.
Ashe stared at her, not seeing why she was so stuck on the prince's name. Yes, Prince Dimitri.
No. You just said Dimitri, not Prince Dimitri. Dimitri! Ashe, are you on a first-name basis with the prince? And you didn't tell me?
She jumped off the chair excitedly. Oh my gosh, that's so cool! No, Evelyn, I misspoke. I don't know the prince like that, honest.
Then why are you using your lying voice?
She accused. Did he really have such a tell?
Come on! Ashe, I won't tell anyone. I promise.
It's complicated. Ashe swore he saw his sister's eyes grow 3 sizes.
Oh my gosh.
She smiled mischievously.
Do you like him?
Ashe felt the color drain from his face and panic rise in his voice. What? No, I don't like him. I mean, I do. No, I like him as our ruler, as a friend. No, I mean... Evelyn's voice rose in volumes until she was almost shouting, Does he like you back? Evelyn, please, Ashe begged. You're not understanding me. There's no way for me to like Prince Dimitri. He's our leader and has better things to do than fall in love with a commoner like me.
Lying voice!
Evelyn! His sister threw her arms up and turned in a frustrated circle.
But you do like him, right? It's kind of obvious, honestly, like how we were looking at his picture a bit ago. Maybe you should tell him. Maybe he likes you back. What's so complicated about it?
She gasped.
Maybe at the coronation, like in a story, underneath the light of the moon, alone together, you tell him, Prince Dimitri. No, just Dimitri. Dimitri, I really like you. And he'll say, I like you too, Ashe. And then...
Enough, Evelyn! Ashe slammed his hands on the table, shouting so loud and forceful that his sister recoiled. This isn't a fairy tale story. This is real life. I think it's time you learn the difference and that these stories aren't real. Those things just don't happen to people. Commoners don't get to love nobility, and they especially don't get to love royalty. His voice bounced off the walls, the library suddenly naturally quiet. His anger calmed as fast as it had appeared. He'd never yelled like that before, and especially not at Evelyn. Evelyn. Looking at his sister, Ashe realized she'd stepped far away from him, body turned towards the exit. Tears were streaking down her face, falling onto the floor with a plop. Oh, Evie, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have yelled like that. He stood and stepped towards her, reaching out, but she jumped away. Evelyn sniffed, wiping her nose in the back of her hand. You know what else only happens in stories? She hiccuped. Noble lords adopting stray-rat orphans! But it happened to us! She turned away from Ashe and sprinted out of the library, her sobs echoing down the corridor. Ashe could only watch her go, guilt settling in the pits of his stomach. He shouldn't have yelled at her like that. It's not her fault. Evelyn's still young enough to believe in silly things like fairy tales and true love conquering all. With a sigh, he resolved to apologize later. But for now, he needed to be alone. Evelyn hadn't spoken to Ashe since the incident in the library. He tried to apologize in a number of ways, asking to play her favorite game, sneaking her a treat from the kitchen, offering to take her into town for some shopping. No matter what he tried, Evelyn still didn't want to be around him. Even on the plane ride to Ferdiad the following week, Evelyn bouncing around the Klein cabin excitedly, she avoided Ashe. Kristoff and Leonardo noticed something was up between the two of them and tried to mediate the situation to no avail. Perhaps they just needed some time away from each other. It just so happens that Ashe would be staying at the palace as an honored guest of Prince Dimitri. The arrangement had been made prior to the ball, and to refuse or back out right before the coronation would have been a serious social misstep. The coronation ceremony was indescribable. Guests and dignitaries from all over Fodlan were in attendance, as well as the usual Fargan nobility. The Archbishop of the Church of Saros presided over the ceremony, and laid the crown upon the prince, now king, Dimitri's head. Afterward, there was a feast and social party in honor of the newly crowned king. Looking around the ballroom, Ashe found his eyes continually drawn to Dimitri. "You're staring. Again," Felix remarked. Ashe shook his head, coming back to the conversation. "Sorry, I zoned out. Who's staring?" Felix scoffed. "You. At Dimitri. You've been looking at him all day like you've got something urgent and important to tell him." "Well, I don't," Ashe said defensively. "He just happened to be in my line of sight." Before Felix could argue, Sylvain appeared, handing them each a glass of fruity-smelling wine. "In case you were wondering, the bartender is gorgeous." "I wasn't," Felix deadpanned. "Don't worry, Felix. You're still the only one for me." Sylvain winked, and Felix excused himself for the restroom. Ashe looked out over the ballroom again, taking in the other sights and people around. He saw Lenato and Christophe in conversation with a group of lords, none of whom he recognized. Evelyn was playing in a far corner of the room with some of the other noble children. Ashe even recognized Claude von Regan among the Almiran royalty. Again, his eyes eventually slipped back to King Dimitri. "Did you and Dimitri have a fight?" Sylvain asked, following his gaze. Ashe sipped his glass of wine, the alcohol warming his chest. "What makes you say that?" Sylvain shrugged. "Just a hunch. He's been different since you left." "Different?" "Yeah. I asked him if he'd made any progress on the mystery man from the ball, and he got quiet and sad, like his dog had died or something." Ashe took another sip. "Maybe he's just nervous for today. Besides, he's looked very happy in all the pictures I've seen with Claude." Sylvain side-eyed him. "Right. Maybe you should talk to him." "What? Why?" "Like I said, he's been different since you left, and hasn't been talking to me or Felix. Maybe a different friendly face will help him open up." The pair watched as Dimitri excused himself from his conversation, then stopped to whisper in Claude's ear. Ashe inadvertently tightened his grip on his glass, and watched Dimitri glide through the throng of people towards a side door. Dudu followed close behind, eyes constantly moving and alert. He turned in their direction and caught Ashe's gaze. Ashe startled at being caught staring, but Dudu only offered him a small smile and inclined his head in the direction Dimitri had gone, then followed his liege. "Go," Sylvain whispered. Ashe nodded, and downed the remainder of his wine in one go and passed the empty glass to a nearby waiter. He strode through the crowd, focusing only on following Dimitri. Therefore, he didn't see the man heading towards the side bar. The men collided, jarring Ashe back to the moment enough to look at the man and apologize. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't watching where I was going." "It's quite all right, young man. No harm done," the man responded kindly. "Do be more careful, though." "Yes, of course. My apologies again." Ashe bowed to the man hurriedly and continued towards his destination. Out in the hallway, Ashe found Dudu standing guard outside of a sitting room, a few feet away from the ballroom. It was the same sitting room they had been in the night of the ball. As if sensing his presence, Dudu looked to him and nodded, then turned and walked down the corridor for a bit, leaving the door unguarded. Moving quickly, Ashe walked into the sitting room and closed the door softly behind him. "Thank you, Dudu. It'll only be a moment more." Dimitri stood at the far end of the sitting room, gazing out the window. "I'm sorry to intrude, Your Majesty." Dimitri turned sharply. "Lord Hubert," he acknowledged. "It is good to see you. I'm sorry I have not completed my rounds in the ballroom, and have yet to greet you and your family." Ashe shook his head, feeling awkward at the lack of familiarity in the king's speech. "No apology necessary, Your Majesty. My family and I know you mean no offense." "You are ever gracious, Lord Hubert." "Thank you." The king sounded exhausted. "If you please, it will be just a moment longer." "Are you okay, Dimitri?" Ashe asked hurriedly, ignoring the dismissal, his tongue loosened and emboldened from the wine. "Sylvain was concerned about you, and I thought I'd ask. Do let me in to follow you." Dimitri sighed, and his shoulders sagged, but not with the weight of the cape he wore. "How do I even begin to answer that?" Ashe shifted his weight, trying to decide how to narrow down the possible cause of his friend's hesitation. "The papers say you're planning a grand proposal," he said, hoping to convey a sense of happiness. "Congratulations." Dimitri scoffed. "The tabloids only see what they want to see. And if it's not there, they make it up. Claude is a wonderful person, and will make a fine partner for someone. But it won't be me." Ashe looked up sharply. "But what about your reign? It's conditional on you taking a partner." "That is an archaic law, and one I will see abolished." Dimitri sighed again, calming the sudden storm of emotion that had washed over him. "When my birth mother died, my father did not have to take another wife. He would have ruled alone and received little criticism for it. I never understood why marriage should be a prerequisite to rule." He met Ashe's eyes. "Even so, I wouldn't feel right marrying for politics." The king chuckled and nervously rubbed the back of his neck. "This may sound ridiculous, but remember when we spoke about your hero stories?" Did he remember? How could Ashe forget? Suddenly unsure of his voice, Ashe could only nod. "That is what I want," Dimitri continued. "A heroic love story. Dinners by candlelight, long looks, just marveling at the person I am honored to call beloved in my life. Even the idea of my partner wearing a token of mine as a joust in a tournament, pledging to win for them, is terribly romantic." "That's one of my favorite tropes," Ashe said, voice barely a whisper. Dimitri smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I know." Ashe recognized it then, that look in Dimitri's eyes. Ashe imagined similar scenarios when he thought about the future and having a partner. Who wouldn't dream of holding hands while walking through the park or down a crowded city street, moving around each other in the bathroom as you prepare for your day, a well-choreographed dance of toothbrushes, hair gel, and little kisses? Ashe imagined all these things with Dimitri, and Dimitri, it seemed, imagined all these things with Ashe. Whether it was the wine loosening his reservations or the soft and vulnerable look Dimitri wore, Ashe didn't know, but he suddenly felt compelled to tell Dimitri exactly how he felt. He walked towards the Prince Royal, reaching out to join their hands. "Dimitri," he slurred, "I have to tell you." Ashe was cut off by a commotion on the other side of the door. In moments, the royal guard burst into the room, shouting commands and separating the two men. "You! Stand down! Step back, your majesty!" Suddenly, Ashe found himself restrained by two guards on the opposite wall, away from Dimitri. They each held one of his arms and shoved his chest against the wall. "Halt!" Dimitri exclaimed. "Unhand him at once! Explain yourselves!" "I'm afraid that's impossible, your majesty." Ashe struggled against the hold on him, turning his head to the new voice, clear as day despite the chaos. "Cornelia, what is the meaning of this?" Dimitri yelled, veiled in anger. "My sincerest apologies, your majesty," Cornelia replied with false concern. "We were recently informed of a robbery plot and possible assassination. It was imperative we found you at once." Ashe froze. "Robbery? Assassination? Who would do such a thing?" "I see. But what does that have to do with Ashe, Lord Ubert? He has been the only one with me during my break from the celebration." "Unfortunately, that's just it, your majesty." At some unspoken command, Ashe was turned around and brought to the center of the room, facing Dimitri, Cornelia, and the rest of the royal guard. "The anonymous tip led us to Lord Ubert's room, where we discovered thieves' tools, a detailed map of the palace grounds, and vials of an unknown substance, possibly poison." Ashe paled, and he lost all trace of the warm, alcoholic buzz he'd been previously filled with. This was Cornelia's warning coming to life. She had set him up for treason. Dimitri turned from his advisor. "Ashe?" Ashe shook his head vehemently. "No, Your Majesty, that's not true. I would never." "Search him," Cornelia demanded. "He's been alone with the Prince Royal, just waiting for an opportunity." A third guard advanced towards Ashe and began patting him down, turning out his pockets. "There's nothing. I swear I don't have—" The rest of the sentence died in his throat as the guard patted the inside pocket of his jacket against his side. There was something there, something Ashe didn't have earlier. Feeling the unknown item, the guard reached into the pocket and removed a small vial of purple liquid. "Aha!" the royal advisor shrieked triumphantly. "Just like the ones in his room." "That's not mine. I've never seen it before in my life." Ashe struggled to pull away from the guards that held him, pleading to his friend. "Please, Dimitri, I swear, I wouldn't do anything to harm you, please." Dimitri's eyes glazed, sadness and betrayal shining in the bright blue. He didn't believe him. Dimitri believed Cornelia, believed that Ashe had been using him, getting close to him in order to do harm. Just like she had said before, Ashe had to get out of there. He elbowed one of his captors in the stomach, breaking free of their hold. In the surprise and confusion, he wrenched his arm free from the other and hustled towards the door. Before he reached the corridor, another guard tackled him from behind, the fall knocking the wind out of his lungs. Ashe twisted and flailed, trying in vain to gain the upper hand. His arms were pinned behind his back and bound. "Stop struggling," the guard whispered. "It's over." Resigned to his fate, Ashe went limp and was lifted to his feet once again. He looked to Dimitri, silent, eyes still pleading for him to understand, to know deep down that this was a mistake, some kind of misunderstanding, that Ashe was being framed. "Dimitri," he whispered, a final appeal, his eyes beginning to sting and water. Dimitri looked to him, face twisted in an angry scowl, no trace of the vulnerable romantic that had been there moments ago. "Get him out of my sight," he growled. Ashe felt a tear run down his cheek as the guards marched him out of the sitting room and down to a holding cell.